Chapter 7, Mishnah 6. The Mishnah turns to a different subject, namely where one person or object was immersed in a mikveh that measures exactly 40 sah, and then a second person immersed himself in the same mikveh. If a mikveh contained exactly 40 sah, and two people went down and immersed themselves in it one after another, the first person is tahor and the second one is tameh. That is, the first person's immersion is valid because he immersed himself in a mikveh of 40 sah. But the second person's immersion is invalid. When a person comes out of a mikveh, some water clings to his body and leaves the mikveh with him. Consequently, since this mikveh had exactly 40 sah before the first person's immersion, it has less than 40 sah when he leaves. The second person therefore immersed himself in less than 40 sah, which is an invalid immersion. Rabbi Yehuda holds that the previous ruling does not apply in every situation. Rabbi Yehuda says if the feet of the person were touching the water, i.e., he had not yet completely climbed out of the mikveh, when the second person immersed himself, the second person is also tahor. That is, his immersion is valid. At the time of the second person's immersion, some part of the first person, even just the soles of his feet, was still in the mikveh. In that case, although most of the first person's body had already left the mikveh, taking with it some of the water, thus reducing the mikveh to less than 40 sah, the second person's immersion is valid. This ruling is based on the principle of good achis, extend and lower, which tell us that the water on the upper part of the first person's body, which had already left the mikveh, is connected to the mikveh water through the wetness of his body. Thus, the mikveh had its entire 40 sah when the second person immersed himself, and so his immersion is valid. Another case where Rabbi Yehuda applies the rule of good achis to water that was removed from a mikveh that measures exactly 40 sah. If someone immersed in a thick garment in the mikveh and then removed it, but part of the garment remained in contact with the water, and then someone immersed himself in the mikveh, the person is tahor, although the water absorbed in the upper part of the garment was removed from the mikveh, thus reducing it to less than 40 sah. The rule of good achis tells us that since the removed water is connected to the water of the mikveh, it counts toward the required 40 sah. The Mishnah deals with yet another situation involving a mikveh that measures exactly 40 sah. When an object becomes tameh and requires immersion, the mikveh water has to reach all of its surfaces, including the inner ones. Therefore, the stuffing inside a leather cushion must be removed before the cushion is immersed, so that the water can reach its inside surfaces. However, when the stuffing is removed, the cushion becomes an empty bag, which makes any water inside it shuvin. Hence, if this bag is immersed in a mikveh of exactly 40 sah, the following problem arises. Water that entered the bag during immersion becomes shuvin when the bag is removed from the mikveh. At the same time, due to the removal of this water, the amount of water remaining in the mikveh is reduced to less than 40 sah. Therefore, if the water inside the bag falls back into the mikveh, it will disqualify the mikveh. The Mishnah teaches how to immerse such an object without disqualifying it by adding shuvin. If an empty leather mattress or cushion is immersed in a mikveh that contains exactly 40 sah, as soon as one raises their openings out of the water, the water inside them becomes shuvin, which can disqualify the mikveh. What should one do to protect the mikveh from disqualification? One should immerse them and then lift them out of the mikveh upside down. That is, one should turn the bag upside down when it is still in the water. When the bag is upside down, the water inside it is not being held by the bag and thus does not become shuvin. Therefore, as the bag is lifted out of the mikveh and the water falls back into it, the mikveh remains valid.